Welcome, everyone. I'm Alan T, and this is Alan T's Got Answers. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to switch up kind of my episode format. I felt like the intro was a little long, so I'm gonna you probably already noticed since you're already watching, but I'm gonna shorten that up a little bit just so we can kind of get right to it. I really like the intro, the long intro, but it just seems like it's a little bit too much for what I'm trying to do here. And then also what I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten it up. Instead of doing 2 or 3 questions for each episode, I'm just going to do one because it just seemed like it was starting to get really long. And the other thing is I started doing this because I was kind of getting bored. I had a lot of free time. Well, now with the job that I have, it's seasonal, and so the season is coming up to where it's starting to get busy. So I know that I'm not going to have a lot of time to really do like a 30-minute long video because that's a lot of editing and everything. So today I'm just going to do one question, and of course, as usual, it's going to turn out to be long anyways because it's just going to be long. So to get right to the question actually did come from a viewer, and it says, which one of your hobbies do you enjoy the most? Now, of course, as I just said, this is going to be long, so I'm going to preface with the fact that this is going to be long. And I guess I also want to recap on, from the first episode of what I'm trying to do here and what I want from these videos. And really, it came down to, just trying to preserve a lot of the stories that I have and trying to, relive and think about all the times that I've spent in my life and what those times meant to me and sharing those things. Obviously, for the most, the people who are watching this are people that I know. And so most people are going to, I say most people are going to know them. Most people aren't going to know all these stories. But I guess I thought it would be cool to give everybody out there who does know me and from one aspect of my life, to give them all these additional little stories and little backstories. So it's kind of like, I guess it's like the show Yellowstone. The first Yellowstone was what was happening in today's world, and then they decided to start doing the older ones to give you the backstory. So I guess in a way it's kind of like that. Like I'm kind of giving you some backstories, and I guess I thought some people might find it interesting. Again, it's just me. It's just me talking and telling my little stories. So I hope everybody out there finds it interesting, and we're just gonna keep on rolling with them. And I'm having a good time doing them. And obviously, as most people probably know, I'm doing other videos in between, other little silly little just comedy videos. I'm just kind of living out my childhood in some of these videos, and I'm just having a blast with them. And so let's get right to it. So the question, which one of your hobbies do you enjoy the most? Obviously, I've had a ton of hobbies in my lifetime, and so I'm not going to really be able to I could spend hours talking about all of them. So I'm going to just try and hit the highlights and go from there. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately or fortunately, I was like cursed early on, and by a friend of mine's dad, who in a kind of a long story, he just looked at me one day. He said, you're going to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. And so, man, that has really haunted me because I do well with a lot of stuff. But I don't do although I'm going to get to it, I do one thing, what I feel I do it very well. And I'll get to that towards the end. Unfortunately, the one thing that I do well isn't a hobby. It's what I do for work. But that's why I'm successful at what I do. But to start with the hobbies, and to back up to the man who told me the story, when I was thinking about all this, and it brought up one story that really stuck out in my brain about this man, Mr. Wimbrow. And I was friends with his son, John, and his mom was not really super strict, but kind of strict. So John had chores and stuff he had to do before he can come outside and play. And so it was, and I met him when I was 11 years old, and I moved to Belchase, Louisiana. My dad was military. We went there because of the naval base. And so I would go over to John's house, and his mom would let him come out and play until he was done with all his chores and his homework. And so, which, now it's like looking back, I'm like, oh man, that kind of stinks. But now it's like, I admire it. I admire it because anybody out there who knows John, he was a wild child, a very wild child, a unbelievable, loyal friend, but definitely a wild child. And so anyway, so I used to go to his house, and so I'd have to wait for him. And Mr. Wimbrow is always outside. I'm almost always messing with his old motorcycle. And so that might be kind of where I started getting into motorcycles, because I kind of like how he would tinker with them. And so I would sit out there while he's working them. And so I would kind of help him. I say help, maybe like hand him a tool or something like that and just talk to him. And so there's this one particular time, and this is the funniest. This has nothing to do with my hobbies, but it's just a funny little story. And so there's one time out there, and I'm helping him, and he's got the wiring harness. And so he's like, here, hold this wiring harness and pull it up out of the way so that I can see what I'm doing. I'm like, okay. And so during the whole process, it's like all of a sudden I realized that whatever he was doing, I can't remember specifically what he was doing, but I made a comment. I made like, Mr. Wimbrow, why don't you do that? And it was so like profound and hysterical. As soon as I made that little comment, I said, Mr. Wimbrow, why don't you do it like that? He just turned and looked at me, just as straight face as ever. And he turned and looked at me and he says, who's humping this cow, me or you? I just need you to hold the tail while I do the work. I just like staring at him and said, Mr. Wimbrow, that's very interesting, somewhat inappropriate, but that's hysterical. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna hold the tail while you do the work. And so, and that story has been with me for forever. And there's been several times where I'm doing something and somebody makes kind of like a little comment of what they think I should be doing. And in the back of my brain, I'd never say this out loud. In the back of my brain, I'm channeling Mr. Wimbrow, and I'm like, who's humping this cow, me or you? You just hold the tail, let me do the work, okay? So anyway, let me check, make sure we're recording. All right, because I don't want to get too far into this thing, because I've done that before. The recording's happening over here, and I start talking away, and I didn't start the audio recording. So sorry for that. So anyway, so getting into the hobby section of this answer, the actual meat and potatoes of this answer. As a kid, obviously growing up in the 70s, bicycles. I was always into bicycles. Every kid was into bicycles during the 70s. But I was super big into it because my dad was kind of a mechanic by hobby. And so I started like building bikes, and I think I talked about that in one of my earlier episodes, where I would paint bicycles, and I would kind of Frankenstein these bicycles, and just really had a good time with it. But when I moved to Bellchase, and right around 12 years old or something like that, I started getting into freestyle bicycle. So, we do all the little tricks, do all the flat ground tricks on the ground. And then that's when I actually I wanted to build a ramp, so the little half pipe, and start doing the air tricks. But the flat ground tricks is, since I didn't have the ramp at the time, that's what I started doing. Now, again, it was a great hobby, and I loved doing it, but I really wasn't great at it. There was a handful of tricks that I could do, and I could do those, relatively well. And obviously, I would show those off to people. And I remember there's a friend of mine. She lived down the street. We were the same age. She lived down the street, and I think, I don't know if I knew that her I don't know if I knew that her bedroom was facing the street, but whenever I'd pass her house, because I thought she was cute, I would always like do tricks, like right in front of her house, hoping that she would see them. Typical stupid little boy trying to impress the girls, and but I thought that was kind of adorable, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I even said that. But I'm gonna leave this in here, and hopefully she doesn't kill me. But anyway. So yeah, I love doing the BMX. I love doing the freestyle, and I wanted to build the half pipe because I really wanted to get into it. And I remember at the time, BMX Plus magazine was the freestyle magazine. That was it, and I used to get them, and they had a how-to video on how to build one. And they even have a parts list and everything. And so I remember going to the oh, what was it called? West. It was a hardware store, big hardware store. It's like before Home Depot and Lowe's and all that got started. And so I went to West, and we walked through, and I had my parts list, and Dad was getting prices, and we were all adding them up and everything. And I was so excited. I thought we were going to get all the wood, and we're going to go home. We're just going to build this ram. And once I got all the prices and totaled it all up, I'm like, all right, and we start, getting our cart together. And he just looked at me, and he said, I'm sorry, son. We just don't have the money to do this. And I didn't realize at the time, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And my dad had a military salary. I didn't realize, we had enough to survive. We had everything that we needed, but we didn't have a whole lot of extra money for something like that. And I understand it now. As a kid, I didn't understand it at all. I was crushed. I was devastated. And I just remember getting in the car on the ride home, just utterly deflated. And we get back home, and my dad says, all right, come with me. And we go in the garage, and he wheels out the lawnmower, and then he grabs a gas can and he hands me the gas can. He said, why don't you go out there and see if some of the neighbors might want their grass cut. And I'm like, really? I was cutting the grass at the time. I'm like, they would pay me to do that? And so I'm like, okay. But I looked at him, I was like, well, this gas can's empty, Dad. That one over there's got gas in it. He's like, well, that's my gas can. That's to cut our yard. He said, you've got your little allowance. Why don't you, of course, at the time, I think a gallon of gas was like 85 cents. And so, yeah, I had $1. And so I went and filled up the gas can. And the next thing I know, I'm riding my bicycle and pulling the lawnmower down the neighborhood, knocking on doors and asking people if I could cut their grass for them. And I got people to let me cut their grass. Now, looking back, I'm sure I screwed it all up. I'm sure all these people either cut the grass themselves or paid somebody to cut their grass. But they were just probably, you know what, I'm just going to help this kid out. He's probably going to butcher the lawn, and then I'll have my guys come and straighten it back up again. But anyway, so I did that for like a whole summer, and I wound up saving up enough money to build that ramp. And at first I saved up enough to build a quarter pipe, so only one side. And man, I had to pedal my butt off to get enough speed to go and up in the air and then come back. And so I got so tired of getting exhausted pedaling just for that, one little up and down. So I'm like, all right, I got to build the other side. So there I'm back on my bicycle, pulling my lawnmower around with my gas can and knocking on doors. And so I look back on that now, and I'm like, man, that was my first taste of making money. And it was based on commission, because I wasn't getting paid by the hour, I was getting paid by the lawn. And so I think that right there, I feel like every kid should have a job based on commission at first, not based on an hourly. Because having that commission-based job, it really gives you the insight of your time and how, if you can become more efficient in what you're doing, how that can translate and you can make more money. And it also gives you accountability. So anyways, so that's just a fun little story about the ramp and how that kind of started kind of a lifelong thing for me with commission-based jobs, because other than one time when I worked at Adam's Catfish House in Belle Chase, that I was hourly, and that was at the end of my high school career, and then I think maybe a portion, a year or so after I graduated. And then after that, then I started for the body shop and went to making commission on the cars that I painted. So, and then ultimately led to the job that I'm at now, where I still get paid on commission. And so I've more or less have been paid on commission my entire life. And I think it's something that, I don't know. I feel like it has a lot of positives. It obviously has negatives. When I'm not working, I'm not making money. So, if I'm sick, most of the time on people on commission, they don't get sick days. They just don't. People on a salary or people on hourly, yeah, you accumulate sick days. So there's pluses and minuses, but I feel like it's definitely something that the young people today should experience, is a commission-based type of pay. But anyway, let's get back to it. So it was. I say I'm going to call it a hobby, But it's when I started working at the body shop. Obviously, for my job, I was painting cars. But as a hobby, I was, painting cars for my friends. I was building cars. I say building cars. I was painting my own cars and customizing my own cars, and doing the motorcycles. I painted a whole lot of motorcycles. Another interesting little side story. I'm going to get off on these side stories all the time. Everybody who's watching already knows I'm going to jump off and tell a side story as far as painting the motorcycles and when I'm talking about commission-based pay. So I was painting these motorcycles in my garage, and I thought I was doing pretty good. It's like, all right, I may make $300 profit on a basic paint job at the time. I felt that was pretty good money, because it would take me maybe like 3 hours. It didn't take long to paint a motorcycle, so maybe 3 hours, and so I was making $100 an hour. So I'm like, oh man, that's great. I mean, even in today's, that's great. So anyway, and I started getting a little bit of notoriety with some in the area. And so I got a phone call, or I got paged. That's when we had pagers. I got a page, and I called it, and it was the Harley Davidson in New Orleans, right there in Gretna. And so the guy, service manager, said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about painting a motorcycle. I saw some of your work, and I'd like to talk to you about it. You mind coming down and looking at it? So I drove over there and checked it out. I'm like, all right. He's like, give me a quote. So I'm like, oh man, it's a basic paint job. He just wants it straight black. This is going to be pretty easy. I'm just like, and if I can, my materials is going to be maybe $150. So, I want to make like $350. So I'm going to tell him $500. So I told him $500. And the guy looked at me and just was like, kind of had this dumbfounded look on his face. And I'm like, and he didn't say anything. And I'm like, oh man, I way overshot this. I told him too much. And I was like, is that too much? He's like, no, that's not enough. And I'm like, it's not enough. He's like, yeah, that's not enough. He said, my customers, these are high-end Harleys. For $500, they think they're going to get a garbage paint job. And I'm like, really? Because I knew my work at the time, and I'm like, well, you saw my work. He's like, I know, I saw your work. It's top-notch. I said, so it needs to be a top-notch fee. I'm like, well, what do you think I should charge? And he's kind of ponders a little bit, and he said, $1,500. I can sell that. I'm like, what? Like $1,500? It's going to take me 3 hours? And he's like, yeah, I can sell that. And so I'm like, all right, yeah, tell him $1,500. And so he gets on the phone, calls the customer, tells him the price. He just gave me a thumbs up. Like that, the person just said, yeah, $1,500. So I grabbed all the parts, went home and painted it, brought them back to him like 3 days later. I had it done in a day, but I was like, man, I can't just give it back to him the next day. That seems like highway robbery. And so I brought him back. So anyway, it's just amazing on the commission end of how things can go, and especially when you excel at something, that there is a market out there for quality work. So anyway, that's another little side story about from the ramp thing and how I learned on commission by cutting grass to earn that, and so it's just an interesting story. I thought that'd be kind of a fun one. But yeah, so I painted the motorcycles for a while, and that was, I guess I'm gonna call that a hobby, because I really enjoyed it. I certainly made money with it, but I definitely enjoyed it. And again, I was good at the basic paint jobs, different colors, maybe two tones and stuff like that. And I did a lot of flames, and flames was really the only thing that I could really do well. Did some graphics. I'd use an airbrush to do some drop shadowing, stuff like that. But to actually like drawing, artists, no, I could do graphics, stuff like that. But I didn't excel beyond that. But still, man, just had a great time with it. So going on in my life and thinking of the next hobby, well, obviously the next hobby is music. I got into music probably when I was 14 years old. And I remember one of my buddies, Scott Lanier, had a drum set in his room. And I'm pretty sure his mom did not like the drum set. Because every time he would play it or I would play it, she was not having a good time with it. No, it's just not having a good time. So anyway, it got to the point one day where I think she made a comment about the drum kit, and I was like, well, I'll buy it. And she's like, wonderful. I think she talked to Scott, and then they sold it to me. So I didn't have a driver's license at the time, so I just had a bicycle. So I wound up driving back and forth to my house with one drum and like, a couple parts, and it took me like 20 trips to get the whole drum kit home, but I got it home. And I don't remember. I don't think I told my parents that I bought the drum kit. I just think I showed up. So unfortunately for them, but my gosh, my mom is she's such an amazing person. She said she loved it. She said she loved hearing me play it. She said she's tapping her feet down in the den, because my bedroom was right over the top of the den. We rented this big house that was right there on the Belle Chase Highway, right next to the library, right next to the high school, and I'd go up there and just wail on those drums so loud, and I'd come downstairs and I'm just like, Mom, is it bothering you? I can stop. She's like, oh no, it's the TV is like, blaring. She says, oh no, it sounds wonderful. And it's just wonderful. It's so encouraging. And so anyway, I wound up getting into music, and as my life went by, I got into bands and stuff like that, and then I started doing live sound. And the live sound thing, I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop and make sure I'm recording again, because I'm getting long. I don't want to mess this take up, because I'm enjoying how it's coming out so far. But I got into doing live sound, and the live sound thing really was a lot of fun. I started doing just small stuff, anybody that would let me mix for them, and then eventually started doing some better gigs and started doing better gigs. And then they got a place called Southport Hall. It's on the East Bank side of New Orleans, and it's a big venue. And I can't remember specifically how I was able to get my foot in the door there, but I was able to get my foot in the door there, and that was the first big club that I mixed sound at. And I really hit it off with the owner, Mark, and his brother. Man, I can't remember his name. And their dad. The dad was hysterical. Really hit it off with him, and I felt that I did a great job. I felt like I mixed really well. I kept it at a reasonable volume, and man, just really had a lot of fun. Mixed a whole lot of fun bands there, and I say the biggest band that not a band, but for I can't remember which Mardi Gras parade group it's for. I don't know if it's Endymion, but they usually have a big blowout in the Superdome. And this one particular year, and they usually have some big name acts that play the show for when the parade ends. They all roll into the Superdome, and then there's just a huge party afterwards. And so that year they had Cyndi Lauper, and so Cyndi Lauper rented Southport Hall on like a Sunday or something for a closed rehearsal. And so she brought her own sound engineer, but she requested a house engineer, so somebody familiar with the system that could work with her engineer. And so when I got there, of course, it was very strict, no photography, no anything. And so working with the guys, with Cyndi Lauper sound engineer was a lot of fun. He was a really great guy. And I specifically remember she used in-ear monitors. And so he would basically sound check her in-ear monitors before she even showed up. The whole band was there. We sound checked the band, and he knew exactly what she wanted in her ears. And I just remember when I turned it on, there was a slight buzz in the system. And he's like, we're going to have to figure this out, because she's going to flip out if that buzz is in her ear. I'm like, all right. So we chased it down. We got a different patch, and everything worked out great. But one thing about the little Cyndi Lauper story, it was super, super cool. She hired all local New Orleans musicians for her band. Didn't bring her own band. Hired them all. And the majority of the people at that time, I'd kind of been in the little music area long enough to where the majority of the people that were on the stage, I knew who they were. I knew of them, or I've mixed for them, and they kind of knew me. And so it was so cool that she used local musicians. She basically gave them sheet music. So these guys, unbelievably talented. They can just glance at sheet music and just play the song. It's so amazing how talented some people are with these with music and stuff like that. And so the kind of the cool story was I can't remember what song she started with, but she started, and at the time, and this is a while ago. This is probably 15 or more years ago. At the time, I think she was 60 because she didn't really hit it big until she was older. And so, she's much older, than we think. And so, I mean, she definitely looked older. She didn't look like she did in her 30s, well, obviously. But when she started to sing, oh my gosh, it was amazing. I'm just like, she sounds like she's in her 30s. And her voice was so powerful. Now, granted, we were in an empty club, but when she would hit some of these notes, it was rattling the dust off the rafters. And so, but that was cool. But one part that was really kind of cool, she had a horn section there. And I always love mixing horn sections, love mixing horn bands. And so they had a trumpet solo. And so they're in the middle of the song, they're playing along, and the trumpet solo comes up. And the guy steps up just a little bit from the rest of the group and starts going into the solo. And she's up there and she's doing her thing. And she's like in her zone. And she's doing her thing. And all of a sudden she looks at the guy. And then she keeps looking at him. And next thing you know, she tells everybody to stop. And she walks over to the guy and it's like, man, I'm sitting there thinking, man, I thought it sounded good. And I looked at the sound guy. Is everything all right? He's like, no, everything's fine. And she looked at him and she said, you played every note. Every note you played. She said, but I want to feel those notes. I want to feel them coming from you. Don't just play the notes. I want you to play the notes. He said, do you understand what I'm talking about? And the guy's just like, yeah, I can do that. And so she's like, and just turned around and said, let's start from the last blah, blah, blah. I mean, just called it out. I mean, and then boom, boom. And then they started playing right where she wanted to start. And she belted out the couple lines, and then here comes the trumpet solo, and that guy steps up, and all of a sudden he just kind of like squats down, and he just gets into it. And then you could see her, she's standing in front of him, she's going, yes, and you can see her doing like that, and the guy's just getting so into it. She got the passion that was in her body, pulling it out of that guy. It was, I got goosebumps. And then they went back into the song and they finished it. And she just turned around and looked at him and just kind of gave him a thumbs up. And they went to the next song. And it was just astounding. It was just so cool to see such talent in a room and be in such an intimate type of situation. So okay, I need to keep moving on because this thing's getting really long, and I want to make sure my battery's got enough. And I'm still recording over here. So that was the live sound part of it. Oh man, I got some side stories. I'm gonna run out of time here. So I did Southport Hall. I also did a couple gigs at the House of Blues, which was very cool. And I did this one particular one. I still can't remember how the person got my name, but they didn't hire me to do sound. They hired me to be a production manager, and it was just this small little like kind of eclectic music, where it was mainly very eclectic. Most of them weren't full bands. One guy on a guitar just singing, and a couple other little weird little things, and very kind of hippie-ish. And so they and I was in control of the bands. I was control of the production. And so for weeks ahead of that, I was getting people's set lists. I was getting their stage plots. I was communicating with them when they needed to be there, how much time they had on the stage, because there were 8 acts that were going to play, and that's a lot. And so they brought them down to 40 minutes each. And so I told them, I said, you guys got 40 minutes from the time you step on the stage to the time you got to get off. And that includes setting up your gear and tearing down your gear. And so I was really pleased with how I handled it, and really pleased with how it came out, because everybody was on time. And you know what? Everybody was very respectful. They appreciated all the work that I put into it, all the preliminary work, and they understood. They wanted to give everybody time. So I told them, I said, I'm gonna, 5 minutes before their time is, not time was up. I said, I give them 5 minutes to get their stuff off the stage. I said, so 10 minutes before they needed to start tearing their stuff down, I give them kind of like a signal and tell them that they needed to wrap up. And they all did wonderful. And so I guess the funny part of the story is I'm glad I don't know the girl, because she might be a little bit embarrassed, but she was from France, and a wonderful voice. Just incredible voice. And another thing that was really cool is kind of like the Cyndi Lauper thing. She hired 2 local musicians, she flew in from France. I don't know if she was doing like a little, America tour or something like that. But anyway, so she flew in, and her music was very cool. It was very cool. And for some reason, all the acts thought that I was somebody. Like I had clout in the area that I could get them gigs, because they were all giving me like their press kits, which comes with their CD, their bio, comes with a picture of them and everything else. They're all giving it to me, and I didn't really have the heart to tell them that I'm kind of a nobody. So I took them anyways, and I did enjoy listening to some of their stuff, after for the weeks or so after that. But this girl came up to me and gave me her press kit, and I've always heard the French, that there's certain aspects of them. And she came up and she thanked me and leaned in and kind of gave me a hug. And I was so touched with it, but she kind of had a little body odor. And I'm just like, man, so these people, I always heard they don't bathe. And so it was just very interesting, because she was so nice and she was so pretty, but she did have a little smell. So I probably shouldn't have told that story either, because that's kind of mean. But anyway, just all these little stories that are popping up in my brain as I'm talking. So I'm going to try and move on and try and keep this rolling. So with the music thing, obviously that spawned into Edge Set Mary, which is the band I was in. I've talked about that before. And then ultimately, because of my career change, I had to wind up leaving all of that behind, leaving this incredible hobby that I had, and walk away from it all and start this new career where I was traveling. I was just traveling all around, all around the country, mainly in the middle part of the country, because I do hail damage repair on cars. So yeah, once I left the music, then I got caught up in trying to perfect the craft, and that was more or less at the beginning. I said, one thing that I feel like I've really excelled at is what I do, and I fix dents on cars with a technology called paintless dent repair. So you basically take metal rods of different shapes and different configurations, and you come to the backside of the sheet metal and you push, and you basically reshape the dent. So if you have a dent and it makes it that way, you come in with the tools and you press underneath and you lift the dent back up and make it back flat. So that's basically what I do, and I feel like I've done well with it. I feel like I'm pretty good at it. So I got caught up with that, and then somewhere once I started to feel a little bit more comfortable, I was working in Denver, and at the time we had 2 Great Danes. And my wife would come out and visit and stay with me for a couple weeks or a month or so. And I needed to find a place for us to go walk the dogs. And so I was searching for a park. And so I went to this one park. And this one park had a skate park in it. And I used to ride BMX. I did ride skateboard a little bit, but wasn't really good at that. I was better at the bike, so I stuck with the bike thing. So anyway, so I saw the skate park there, and I saw the BMX section of it that had a half pipe, just like I used to have. And I got the bug. So next thing you know, I'm at a local BMX shop, and I'm having them custom build me a bicycle, just for me, for my new size. Because when I was 14, I was probably 120 pounds, and 5'8", 5'9", and now I'm 6'3", and 200 pounds. So I had to have a bike that I wasn't going to break in half. So I had him build me this bike, and I hadn't rode a bicycle since I was like 16. But I went out there with that new bike, and it was amazing. The muscle memory. I just went right back to where I was. Now I wasn't getting crazy. I wasn't catching radical air and doing tabletops and stuff like that. I was just keeping it nice and simple. And I got wore out like that. Well, for one, it's Denver. The altitude here is crazy. But for two, I just haven't done anything like that. So I went back to that park a couple times. And one time when I was done for the day and I was exhausted, I went to the skate park, so the concrete bowl section of it. And I was sitting there watching the guys on the bikes there, because I'm like, okay, I'm going to need to get my nerve up to go out there, because there's a lot of people there. There wasn't a lot of people over by the little BMX section. And I don't want to embarrass myself completely. And so while I was sitting there, a truck pulled up with a welding bed on the back. For those who know what it looks like, they know that it's got the welding machine and everything. And I'm like, all right, some kid's dad's here to pick him up. Well, next thing you know, two dudes jumped out with a little gray in their beards. And I'm like, oh, okay, they're just going to go watch. And next thing you know, they reached in the bed and they pulled out skateboards. And they went down in there and started skating around. I'm like, what? We can do that? We can do that at our age? And they did what I now found out was just carving. So they just, the wheels stay on the ground. They don't do any flip tricks or anything. And in these bowls, in these swimming pools, they just carve around the edges like surfing on concrete. And I was fascinated with that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. I want to do that. I never did it as a kid. I did the half pipe, so just back and forth, but never did the sideways stuff and the carving stuff. And so like, you know what? I'm going to learn how to do that. And so when I work seasonally, and so at the end of my work season, which wraps up about December, back at my place in Belchase, I had a commercial building in the back, and at a paint booth that I was painting motorcycles in, that turned into just a junk storage area because I wasn't painting anymore. And I just remember I'm standing out there with my wife, and we're talking about different things, and I turn around and I look at that paint booth, and I go, poof, that's where I'm going to build a skateboard ramp. So I just looked at her and said, you know what I think I'm going to do? I think I'm going to clean out the paint booth, tear the paint booth down. I think I'm going to build a skateboard ramp. I just remember she looked at me and went, huh? And I said, repeated it. And she's like, oh, all right. And so that's what I did. I tore it down and built me a little small, 3-foot tall one. And what was crazy, I started building it. And I hadn't built it on a skateboard since I was 15, 16. I started building a ramp. I didn't even have a skateboard. I just started building a ramp. So I got online. I can't remember, a skate warehouse, and I ordered a skateboard. And they'll custom build it and everything. And it really wasn't that expensive. I think it was like maybe $130. And so then I ordered, knee pads, elbow pads, wrist guards, helmet. I just ordered a whole bunch of stuff. And because obviously I'm worried. I'm worried I'm gonna hurt myself. And so yeah, I'm close to wrapping up on building this ramp, and then the skateboard shows up. And I got video of me riding it for the first time, and I'm just, going back and forth and then doing a little kick turn here and there. And the muscle memory amazingly was there. I still could do it. And the video lasts all of 30 seconds, my wife filming, all of 30 seconds. And I just remember by the time I stopped because I was absolutely out of breath. 30 seconds was out of breath. And I'm just like, I am so out of shape. But that put a fire under me. And next thing you know, there's a skate park out in Baton Rouge that has all the bowls. I'm like, I've never gone sideways. And so I had to watch videos, and it was not easy. And I got videos that I put on Facebook of me, learning. So all my friends that might be watching this have probably seen some of those videos on my Facebook page. And so needless to say, that has spurred one of what I'm going to answer is my all-time favorite hobby, or the question is, which one of your hobbies do you enjoy the most? It's the skateboarding. And obviously, since it's recent, it's new, it's something that I'm doing right now. Obviously, that's why I'm enjoying it the most. But I started as I travel for work. I go to all these. I work in Indianapolis. I worked near Detroit. I've worked in Texas, all over Texas, all the big cities. Kansas City, surprisingly, is a wonderful town. I love that town. They all have these incredible skate parks, and I'm like, this is perfect. I go to these places, and I usually get there early. I'm the early bird special. I want to get there before everybody else, so I don't embarrass myself. And man, just the challenges of trying to accomplish something that I've never done before. At the time, let's see, oh my gosh, how long ago was that? That was maybe 2016. So, that's 8-9 years from now, 8-9 years ago. And so I've learned so much. And then in one respect, I haven't really, progressed that much. Feel like I'm kind of stuck in a spot. It's because to really get anywhere further, I really have to start pushing myself, either going faster and going higher. And as I'm 52 now, obviously I'm concerned about my own personal well-being. And To make matters worse, when I was like 13 or 14, I broke my left arm like in half. Like right here, it broke in half and folded over. It was a pretty gnarly break. And I did that on a skateboard on a little 2-foot ramp. Now I was riding my half pipe, and it's an 8-foot tall half pipe, and I'm getting like 5-6 feet of air in my bicycle and landing it and doing that back and forth. And I was loving that and had no problem with that. But this tiny little ramp and this on somebody else's house, did a simple little trick and snap, my arm just broke. So I am terrified of breaking my arm. So even though I got all the pads in the world, I just know that all it's going to take is that one right hit, and I'm going to break my arm, and I'm not going to be able to work. I'm not going to be able to work for a while. And we all know that, if you're out of work for months at a time, that can be devastating. So even though I'm deathly terrified of hurting myself to the point where it's going to affect my ability to maintain our household, I still go out there, and my nerves are going, the adrenaline's going, and I get a lot of speed. I can go fast. Something about going up high, I get scared. But man, I've just had such a good time. And when I go to the skate parks early in the morning, that's usually the old man hour. And so I've met so many cool guys, so many cool people, so many ladies too that are skateboarding. And so here in Denver, where I'm currently working, there's so many skate parks, so many like $1 million parks here. It's amazing. And they've got a group called the Old Dude Skate Crew. And I think it's like the youngest is probably late 40s, and the oldest is probably 62. And I think the 62-year-old is him and his wife. And I think his wife is probably 60. I'm assuming. I don't even know. And if I overaged her, I certainly apologize. I don't know if she's going to watch this or not. But if I did overage you, I'm so sorry. But so it's just amazing to see these older crew, that they're so inspiring. They encourage everybody. Even the young kids that come out there, it's not like it used to be. It was the skate punks back then. It's very different. I mean, there's still plenty of punks out there. There's always going to be punks, but it seems like the kind of, I guess you call it, the genre of people have definitely changed. It definitely seems it's more like a community of people. And so that's certainly been awesome. I've met a lot of cool people, some now that are best friends of mine, and have just traveled with these people, spent so much time with these friends of mine. They've become unbelievably close, like brothers and sisters to me. And so yeah, I guess I'm going to try and wrap this thing up because my battery level is getting very low. And this one question has turned into a very long answer, but I knew it was going to, because I knew I had a lot of stories to tell. And so, yeah, so I guess if the question is, which one of your hobbies do you enjoy the most? The hobby I enjoy the most is skateboarding. Thank you so much for your question. You guys take care.